Today's program is being recorded. Any views expressed in this webinar are for general educational purposes only and do not represent any official views or positions of the sponsoring or presenters organizations. We are looking forward to your questions at the end of the program. Please submit them anytime using the Q&A section during the presentation. Greetings and welcome to today's educational program, How Supply Chain Can Be More Resilient by Practicing Lean, Green and Agile Methodologies in Post-Pandemic Era by Dr. Goutam Sengupta. This is a joint webinar hosted by the ASQ Education Division and the Quality Management Division. This is your moderator, Shobha Mittal with ASQ Quality Management Division. Today we have the distinct pleasure of hearing from Dr. Sengupta. Please join me in welcoming him. Dr. Goutam Sengupta is a PMI Agile certified practitioner and a PMI certified project management professional. He is a professional member of the ASQ and is considered as a specialist in quality concepts and total quality management. He is currently the Vice Chancellor, Techno India University, West Bengal, India. He is co-founder and managing director of GSS Info Solutions Private Limited. He is in the advisory board of Federation of Small and Medium Industries, the leading body of SMEs in eastern part of India. He has institutionalized lean practices in SMEs. He is currently adjunct professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, teaching Six Sigma and Agile methodologies, and chairman of the board of Institution of Valuers Registered Valuers Foundation, a premium valuation educational conglomerate in India. He is a former general manager in Philips and former director of Calcutta Business School. He has a rare distinct of turning around industries by application of people management skill. And so, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sengupta to you all. Dr. Sengupta, the floor is all yours.
Greetings. Thank you so much, Shobha, for your kind words and understanding that the participants are from all over the world. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. What I'm going to deliver today is the topic on how supply chains can become more resilient by practicing lean, green, and agile methodologies in the post-pandemic era. Now, I have been already introduced, so I will just talk about some of my special skills. Those are organization turnaround specialist. I have turned many organizations in the world, from a non-performing organization to a very vibrant organization. I am an agile practitioner certified by Project Management Institute, America. I am a quality cycle practitioner. I am a TQM and Six Sigma practitioner. Now, what are the learning objectives? What will you really get out of this? You will, in this session, you will understand the importance and significance of supply chains and the plight that the pandemic has inflicted on the supply chains. Brainstorm on the feasible solutions for supply chains, more so to combat this perilous situation. Appreciate the power of lean, green, and agile to overcome this crisis. Comprehend application of research methodologies. Since this is a ASQ Education Division and QMD joint webinar, so I thought that I should also put research into this. So comprehend application of research methodologies carried out by us during pandemic times on global supply chains for utilization of lean, green, and agile mindset, principles, and methodologies to benefit the supply chains in their quest for resilience. Learn how to evolve a framework for rejuvenation of supply chains through judicious application, adoption, and implementation of lean, green, and agile processes and systems. Let me tell you at this point of time that this is more of a research work undertaken by me and some of my research scholars from my university. Few of them are here, one of them is here. And this is a more lean towards the research work which we have done. Now, if you look at what happened during the COVID and what are the portfolios which got affected during the pandemic, there is hardly any portfolio which was left. Every portfolio was affected. We talk about healthcare, we talk about technology, we talk about consumer staples, communications, materials, industrials, utilities, consumer discretionary, financials, energy, everything was affected. All the data which I am presenting today are all verified and verified data from the sources like United Nations, and none of the data is prepared from our end. So everything is verified and the globally verified data. So this is the global stock market performance. So we look at the global stock market performance. Source is the Bloomberg, and what you are seeing is the stock market talks about what was happening in these sectors. So businesses were either sinking, swimming, or surfing, and some doing all three across their portfolios. That is what happened during the time of COVID. Now, if we look at, this is the World Bank data. If we look at what happened to the people who work in industries, we found that almost every industry was affected. 1/4 of companies saw their sales fall by 50%. On average, sales dropped 27%. Despite the shock, firms held on to their workers. By 65% of businesses adjusted payroll by reducing hours, wages, or granting leave. Because of these adjustments, only 11% of companies laid off workers. Not enough firms were adopting digital solutions, especially in poorer countries and amongst smaller firms, because our study was a global study, so we included every country. And what we found was 34% of firms have increased the use of the internet, social media, and digital platforms. 17% of the firms have invested in new equipment, software, or digital solutions. And if we look at the policy support, we found policy support is weak where it was needed most, in poorer countries and for smaller firms. 1 in 10 companies in low-income countries received any type of public support. More than 70% of firms in low-income countries report lack of awareness as the main obstacle to accessing support. 1 of 5 of firms that did not experience any shock due to COVID-19 received public support, suggesting fiscal resources would have targeted more efficient. Now, if you look at, I'm sure many of you are either supply chain professionals or you have deep interest in supply chain. If you look at what happened to the supply chain, if I'm permitted to say, supply chain just collapsed. Now, if you look at the impact of the pandemic on global supply chain, it was a major disruption along the lines of having an earthquake or a tsunami, standstill in many businesses, work suspension in production units, disruption to global manufacturing industries and their supply networks, dwindling workforce availability, fear of extinction of specialized skills, plummeting consumer confidence in disrupted supply chain, resulting into acute stress on working capital for business. Owing to the globalization of supply chain ecosystems over the previous 2-3 decades, seemingly no company is immune. If you look at pre-COVID phase, we all spoke about reduction. I'm sure you will agree with me. We all spoke about reduction of sources, reduction of supply sources. We tried to be lean without understanding the real meaning of it. And we said that we should source across the world, nothing wrong. In the process, we forgot about the importance of proximate sourcing. And that had affected it had helped the collapse of the supply chain. We'll talk it little later. Now, Sova told me during the introduced me that I had worked with SME. I love to work with SMEs. And the question comes that where SMEs spared because they are small. So did the earthquake affected them or did it not? Contrary to the general views that smaller companies were not affected, it was other way around. Smaller companies see larger impact from COVID-19. You are looking at if you see the graph on the top, the blue part, you will see micro, small, medium, and large, and you will see the 60% of the small industries were strongly affected, and 51% medium, and only 43% of the large industries. So everyone was affected, but the small industries were affected most. That was the irony of what happened during pandemic. When we looked at which country was spared, we found none. All countries were affected. Every country was affected by pandemic. Most countries were heavily affected, but the worst results came from Africa and Southeast Asia, and in general from emerging countries. And you are seeing the graph that how it affected the SMEs, and they made many of the SMEs closing down. So the research and the sampling, what we have done, we picked up samples from those regions which was affected most to find out what could be the solution. Suppose we face another pandemic. How do we make our supply chain robust? That is the topic of today's discussion, delivery. Before I go further, I would like to, along with you, I would like to go through how the supply chains have evolved, because this is a supply chain. We are talking about how supply chains can become more resilient by practicing lean and agile methodologies in the post-pandemic era. So basically, we are talking about supply chains. So how the supply chain revolutions took place in the last 100 years. The first revolution was brought by Ford supply chain, 1910-1920. The first major revolution was staged by the Ford Motor Company, where the company managed a build to a tightly integrated chain. The company owned every part of the chain, right from the timber to the rails. Through its tightly integrated chain, it could manage the journey from the iron ore mine to the finished automobile in almost 81 hours. Amazing. However, the supply chain could not handle a wide product variety and was not sustainable in the long run. So this is the first revolution in supply chain brought by Ford Motor Company. Then came Toyota, second revolution, Toyota supply chain. It happened 1960 to 1970. Towards the end of the first revolution, the manufacturing industry saw many a change, including a trend towards a wide product variety. Customers wanted more variety. They said every seventh car in a Toyota system should be a different car. And that car should reach anywhere in the world in 7 days flat. That was the kind of expectation. So the Toyota Motor Company successfully addressed these concerns, thereby ushering the second revolution. The Toyota Motor Company came up with the idea that allowed primarily the final assembly to be done in-house. The Toyota Motor Company developed long-term relationships. That's very, very important, which pandemic has taught us. Develop a long-term relationship and supplier partnership with key suppliers. Low setup times and long-term relationships with supplier was the key feature that propelled the second revolution, and was a long journey from the rigidly integrated in-house Ford supply chain to a system which works on trust and partnership. That's the key word which was driven by Toyota, and which is much needed in today's world post-pandemic if we wish to make our supply chain more resilient. The principles followed by Toyota are more popularly known as Toyota Production System. I'm sure many of you know this. This called, in short, we call it TPS. Then came Dell supply chain, 1995-2000. Michael Dell. He came forward and he challenged the Toyota model. He said, customers to customize their products. He did his first experiment on computers. Dell allowed customers to configure their own PCs and track the same in their production and distribution system. At Dell, the trigger for supplies order was the actual orders by customer and not forecasts. That's what is the learning point. It was the actual order and not forecasts. This helped Dell in reducing the inventory in the total chain significantly, along with offering customized products. Dell moved the final assembly close to the customer. Michael Dell said, go near to the customer. The concept is different than what Toyota said. Then came the fourth revolution, 2000-2020, the global supply chain. We were supported by information technology revolution. The fourth revolution brought in existence successful global supply networks with high agility and process velocity. The revolution saw new technologies such as Industry 4.0, data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, IoT, cloud-based SCM, etc., enabling and completely reshaping the modern supply chains. So that is what happened recently, 2020 till pandemic had hit us. Then came the fifth revolution, 2020 to present. Now, question is how the world can rebuild global supply chain resilient after COVID-19, and that's one of the compulsion. That's why we are sitting in this room. The pandemic has resulted in multiplying the vulnerabilities of global supply chains through disruption in global manufacturing industries and their supply network. Look at the graph at the right. You will see where the number of alternative sources are more, there the risks were low. And where the buffer inventory was kept high, the risk was low, which is contrary to the fundamental concepts of supply chain. But that's what happened. And how do we get that without compromising with the fundamental of supply chain science? That is the question. How do we overcome this problem? Now the question comes, and many of my students have asked this question to me, that COVID-19 or pandemic was it a predictable vulnerability? Now there are two opinions. The first opinion is that pandemic COVID-19 is related to black swan, means happens once in a blue moon. A term coined by world famous writer Nicholas Taleb. He described as events that are rare and difficult to predict. So you never know when the next pandemic may hit the supply chain again. This concept was challenged by Nouriel Roubini, who said that these are predictable vulnerabilities. They are the predictable result of built-up economic and financial vulnerabilities and policy mistakes over years, over past few years. Keep on doing policy mistakes, keep on doing wrong practices, and you face this. That was the second thought. Now, when we looked at what happened pre-COVID and what went wrong, if at all anything has went wrong, we found multiple things have gone wrong. One is no integration. The resilience of supply chains and its ability to perform and adjust to shocks hinges on its diverse, dynamic, innovative, integrative, and collaborative intent. Mark the word collaborative intent. For past 2 decades or so, supply chains have tried to become individually competitive, losing its holistic views. Interestingly enough, we learned to compete within verticals of the same company, same trade, and between the countries. Supply chain integration took the backseat. What happened was, I'm sure many of you will agree with me. Within the company, we started competing. One division competes with other, and they do not see eye to eye. It is not necessary to compete that way for growth. You can collaborate and grow. In the same trade, people compete with each other, fiercely compete with each other. That's what we are taught in the pre-COVID era. Most of the business schools, best of the business schools taught that. Competition, competition, and competition. So they started competing in the same trade. Countries started competing with each other. They did not see eye to eye. And there was no need, because if you integrate, you have larger results. It is possible to grow through integration. Our researches have shown it is possible to grow manifold in a sustainable manner if you collaborate. And it was a hard lesson which we got. During the pandemic, what we found was that there are a lot of companies which are carrying excess stock in different parts of the world. And there are a lot of companies who have become out of stock because of no collaboration. We found another very interesting area, that there was no circular supply chain. There is no circulation of the supply chain. Supply chain remained linear, embedded with wastes. No efficient, resource-efficient circular supply chains were evidenced. We automated supply chain with wastes only to generate waste faster. We were in a syndrome of how to automate. And I were consulted by many global companies. They said that we have automated, but we are not getting results. I looked into the detail and I found there are a lot of waste sitting in that system. So if you automate a system which is full of waste, then what do you get? You produce the wastes faster, and that's what happened. So therefore, there's no circulation. We forgot there is a term called circular supply chain. We were deeply involved in new technologies. Nothing wrong in it, but we never understood how to prioritize them. We came with a host of technologies, and the companies got confused. Which one to do first, which one to do second, which one to do last. It depends on your situation, where you are, and what technology you should adopt. It depends on the customers with whom you deal. It depends on the competition with which you are dealing. And then you bring and implement the appropriate technology. So the new technologies were only in silos, and we didn't get the best result out of new technologies. So the supply chain experts did not have insights to prioritize new technologies for supply chain ecosystem involving all stakeholders. No clear roadmap emerged. Then we are talking about the fifth revolution of supply chain, which all of us sitting in this room, we have to persuade and get that happen. And a new format of supply chains implementable across the chain actors with synchronization capabilities are needed. A more resource-efficient circular supply chain model shall emerge to replace the current linear system, which is highly wasteful and polluting, by enhancing the symbiotic relationship between consumption and regenerated supply chains. We need lean supply chains, do more with less. At this point of time, we thought that we should construct a research. And because until you do a research, until you validate, nobody agrees with you. So we constructed a research, and we thought that we should press our research scholars into it. And we picked up some concepts called Delphi technique, focused interviews, paired comparison matrix, decision evaluation matrix. which are very common and very primary research tools. And there are 250 respondents who participated in the qualitative research. A focus group survey conducted during the period March 2020 to mid of April 2021 during the top pandemic period. Survey was conducted maintaining social distancing protocols through webinars on digital platforms. Most of the respondents were supply chain specialists, experts, and practitioners, and few were from educational institutes and consulting domains. We maintained some of the protocols, what is needed in a qualitative research like Delphi. All participants remained anonymous, minimizing the risk of bandwagon effect or halo effect, allowing free expression of opinion, encouraging open critique, which facilitated admission of errors while revising earlier judgments. Respondents participated in 4 webinars and 5 rounds of iterations. In the initial round, there are 120 ideas generated. At the end of 5th round, it converged to only 9 different proposals. And this is the respondent demography. Global multinational 15, national companies 29, consulting companies 37, supply chain specialist 105, management consultant 34, business school 30, total was 250. And the various proposals which came after convergence of Delphi were these 9 proposals, which talked about supply chain strategies, agile supply chain, lean supply chain, multi-sourcing, manufacturing network diversification, etc., etc. And supply chain scenario planning, supply chain analytics, green supply chain. We used a evaluation matrix, which we do in research, and we took help of certain criteria. So you are seeing the criteria: cost impact, forecasting, sustainability, ability to absorb shock, adaptability, robustness, risk anticipation capabilities, etc. And we did a paired comparison to find out which one is more important than other one, pair by pair. And you are seeing the marks here. So we added the marks, and those came as the score, and then you got the rank. So the first rank, as these respondents look at this research, was sustainability. They thought most important part, what you should look for in a supply chain is a sustainability. And the second important is how it is able to absorb shocks. Then we constructed a decision matrix. Decision matrix is, we give the weightage, we multiply the weightage by the score which the respondents are giving, and we get a final mark, and we add it up. Again, we rank it. So the first rank came to lean supply chain. Second was agile supply chain. And third was green supply chain. That's what respondents said. I'm sure their responses were influenced by what happened in pandemic. But nevertheless, the respondents said the call of the hours is lean supply chain, agile supply chain, and green supply chain. It came out of this research which was conducted by us. So the result of the recommendation arising out of the research was lean supply chain, agile supply chain, and green supply chain. But interestingly, the respondents said all 3. The experts' opinion was all 3 to be done simultaneously. And that is the main focus of my presentation today. Many companies, they practice lean, some practice agile, some practice green, but they don't practice in tandem. And if you do not practice in tandem, you will not get the best result because one is influencing the other. For example, if the supply chain is green, then immediately what happens is your risk of the supply chain goes down. The risk which you take in the supply chain goes down. If you are agile, you go near to the customer. And if you are lean, you are able to enhance your velocity. So all these are affecting the other. Let us look at this concept a bit. First is lean. When we talk about lean, what we understand is doing more with less. I want to get more with less. Less resource, less money, less space, less people. So it is a philosophy. It is primarily a set of management techniques focusing on continuous elimination of waste in order to add value to every process or task to get the desired output at a cost for which the customer is willing to pay for. It's a simple formula. Do what your customer is willing to pay for and eliminate what the customer is not willing to pay for. That's it. It is a philosophy based on the Toyota Production System, TPS, and other Japanese management practices that strive to shorten the timeline between the customer order and the shipment of the final product by consistent elimination of waste. It is about getting more with less time, less space, less people, less money, and so on. When I say less people, many of the companies have asked me, what do we do with the people? Do we retrench? Well, the answer is the first you should try to reorient them, move them to a higher skill set, because it will create an environment where you are not able to pursue further if you do not take care of your people. Lean systems encompass the company strategy, processes, quality management, constant management, layout, supply chain design, technology, innovation, and can be used both service and manufacturing firms. Like a manufacturer, each service business takes order from a customer, delivers the service, and collects revenue. Each of these activities typically contains huge amount of waste. Lean principles can be applied to make service processes lean, whether they are front office, hybrid office, or back office. Many of you may be from service industries, and there is a wrong concept that in service industry we cannot use lean. Actually, we can use lean more. IT companies, many of my clients, many of the companies where we give consultancy are from IT. So IT companies are embracing lean much more than the manufacturing sector. I often refer this literature, The Machine That Changed the World, written by Umack Jones and Daniel Ross. This is written on Toyota Production System, which says half the hours of human effort in the factory, half the defects in the finished product, 1/3 of the hours of engineering efforts, half the factory space for the same output, a tenth or less in process inventory will vanish or go away if you become lean. And it is possible to become lean. We have shown through our experimentation that yes, it is possible to become lean. We said circular supply chain. Now, basically, the supply chain is a wrong nomenclature, to permit me to say, because supply chain gives a sense of linearity. Chain means many people think that it is a linear chain. Actually, today the supply chains are no longer there. These are all supply webs. These are all circular. Circular supply chain model formulates sustainable business value as those supply chains converts waste into values. A more resource-efficient circular supply chain model must emerge to replace the current linear chains, which are highly wasteful and polluting, by enhancing the symbiotic relationship between consumption and regenerated supply chains. That is the call of the day. Now, you are seeing at the top, the picture is the linear supply chain, and you are seeing the failure points are many. If the chain fails in a linear supply chain, then you have no way out. But that is why I differ. When we talk about a supply chain, it is no longer linear. It is more of supply webs, which you are seeing in the diagram bottom, where you have many options. And you have to understand that how to use those options. You have to have that provisions of using many options should there be a problem. And as I said, the software industries are doing a great job as far as Lean is concerned. They have just renamed some of the words. Like in a Lean, many of you, I'm sure, are aware that we talk about we use certain words like overproduction, transport. Overproduction is a waste, transport is a waste, motion is a waste, inventory is a waste, waiting is a waste, over processing is waste, defects is of course a waste. Now the IT industries, they have software industries, they have taken the same words and they have rephrased the words like partially done work, extra feature, they call it gold plating, relearning, handoffs, delays, task switching, defects. These are the waste. So what you see is the extra documentation the customer do not need is a waste. Handoffs between different roles is very common in IT industry. Handoffs between different roles like analysts and developers to testers and testers to release management teams. These handoffs are waste. Unnecessary features and complexity in code are waste. Code that is not tested, built, and integrated is a waste. Blockers in processes like approvals and sign-offs are a waste. Ineffective meetings, like those without a clear agenda, is of course a waste. Then we come to a term which is called Agile. And the respondents of our research felt that this is something we must learn. Every company must learn how to become Agile. Now, Agile is a methodology which is more robust than non-Agile. Normally, people think that Agile is a methodology which is ad hoc. It is not at all. Agile has more planning inbuilt in it, but is a method where we involve the customer right from day one. Whatever we do, from day one, we involve the customer. We take the feedback. And then we correct instead of waiting up to the end. So it is a modern approach wherein the team works collaboratively with the customer to determine the project needs, quickly building outputs based on this assumption, getting feedback and continuing forward or adapting as much as needed. The aim is to deliver value by regularly confirming and incorporating the feedback. The stakeholders, we decide the stakeholders before we start any work. We engage the stakeholders. Continuously, the stakeholders monitor us. And that is the way of working with Agile. And there are many methods. If you look at Agile life cycles, this could be an iterative life cycle, incremental life cycle. Iterations after iterations, we correct ourselves. And we deliver in increments. We don't deliver the whole product or service at one go, because the customer may say, I don't agree. So therefore, we involve them in Agile life cycle. So you are sure what you are delivering. Look at this picture, the famous picture, Mona Lisa. Now, if you look at this picture in a non-Agile manner, if the picture was drawn, I'm sure you know what would have happened. What would have happened is the customer do not know what you are drawing. It is all dark. It's a black box. So he is able to see when the final picture is out, and by then he may say, I don't like this picture, and he rejects. So this is in Agile terminology, we call it waterfall approach. Now look at this. If I do an Agile approach, what I do, I involve the customer from day one. And he is able to see what I am doing. And I am incorporating his ideas. So finally, picture which is coming out is up to his expectation. So Da Vinci would have known the head and the face were of primary importance because the client has emphasized this in initial discussions. But many have discovered the neck, arms, and background as being important via continued organic exploration from the head down. The customer shall have the privilege to view the delivery right from the beginning, enabling, providing continual feedback. So in Agile, we talk about 4 great values. those are individuals and interactions, are more important than processes and tools. Don't get me wrong, processes and tools are all important, but what COVID has taught us, individuals and interactions are more important than processes and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. You create piles of documentation. Whom does it help? Helps no one. So working software. Is your software working? Is your product under development working? Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Toyota never does the noisy, I call it negotiation as a noisy term. Negotiations are always noisy. It doesn't give you result. Customer collaboration gives you the best result. Responding to change over following a plan. What is the plan I follow if it is not giving competitive advantage to my customer? And the customer may come in the last cycle of the development and say, I want this change. Will you say no? If you say no, then you are weakening your customer. And if you are weakening your customer, you are going out of market. So we must respond to a change, even if it is the last part of the development cycle over a plan. There are 12 agile principles which talks about our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery. Early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Welcome changing requirement, even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Deliver working software frequently. Business people and developers must work together, not in silos. The technology and market should work together. Like that, there are 12 agile principles which creates the core value of agile. And if you look at this picture, the agile mindset is most important. Then the 4 values, 12 principles, and numerous practices. Wherever I have borrowed something, I have given the source. This is taken from Agile Practice Guide, published by Project Management Institute, US. Now, how it will help the supply chain? The Agile supply chain basically refers to the use of responsiveness, competency, flexibility, and quickness to manage how well the supply chain entity operates on a daily basis. Unlike the lean supply chain, the Agile supply chain uses real-time data and updated information to leverage current operations and real-time data against demand forecast, which helps to improve the overall efficiency and productivity of the given entity. If you look at this diagram on the right, this is from McKinsey. It shows that the agile companies, 94% delivers on time, and they carry average inventory much lower than a non-agile company. Okay, so that is what happens. These are some of the data from McKinsey. Agile companies, 76% top quartile, labor and asset flexibility, risk management, inventory placement, integrated planning, and forecasting. So they are all at the top. Agile companies go on the top because of their agility and because of their bringing the customer all through in the chain. Now, we must go agile. The next generation business are faster, more complex, and less predictable. Firms have to grapple with higher velocity to change on both demand and supply fronts. This phenomenon shall force the companies to design agile and responsive supply chain. Because of the reasons, the large variety product mix, short life cycle, use of quick response manufacturing. I'm sure you know this term, SMED, single minute exchange of die. Focus on rapid response to the market. Now we come to green. I come across many companies who say we are green. They don't understand what is meant by green. And they don't understand what value they will get if they are green. As a result, it only remains in a paper. Actually, they are not green. They only talk about challenges of not becoming green. Now, if you are green, then it has to start from your design. design, raw material, green design, green purchasing, green production, green warehousing, green distribution, and green transportation. Now, the benefits of business from developing a green and sustainable multi-enterprise supply network via green supply chain management, we call it GSCM, are numerous and compelling. They range from improved brand image. Your brand image will improve. If you don't care much for that, it will also reduce your cost and reduce operational risk hugely. A supply chain has got huge risk. We say we never knew that this will happen. And why you never knew? Because your operations are not green. Everywhere there is a risk. So that is what green brings to you. So it can include reduction of energy use and renewable alternatives, cutting water volumes and countering contamination, reducing scrubbing and sequestering greenhouse gases, decreasing quantities of waste, recycling, packaging material reduction, reverse logistics. Reverse logistics is something we need to learn. I have not seen many companies practicing this. And enablers of green supply chain, ethical sourcing, green material, reverse logistics, just-in-time, efficient transportation, and green certification. Now, until we try, people don't believe. They say these are all theory. And how do we try? In a research, what we do, we implement in some sample units, and we see the result. So here we collected the samples from the most affected parts of the world. So we looked at India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and we collected the samples and we put our research scholars there and we asked them to monitor the implementation. Of course, the people who agreed, we went there. The people who did not agree, we did not go there. So based on study conducted in 8 units, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. And you see, these are all measured and these are all documented. What we found, it took almost 1 year, 1.5 years, I think. We found that on-time delivery, before we started implementing lean, green, and agile, it was 23%, and after it becomes 0.12%. Amazing, but it happened. Supply chain quality, we measured by field call rate, called FCR. We found the value before was 6.2%, and after it went down to 0.34%. Business value, it went up from 66 to 99.7. Supply chain cost, you know how we measure supply chain cost. We measure COPQ, cost of quality. We call it cost of poor quality as percentage of revenue. It was as high as 18%, it came down to 6%. Supply chain visibility, which in the supply chain terminology, we call it bullwhip effect. We found it was very opaque. Supply chains were opaque. You are not able to see start to end. 50%, and it went up to 98%. Predictability, velocity, it went up from 4 to 16. Process improvement, we call it FOR, follow-up rate, how many products or services are falling off. It went up from 13.7 to went down from 13.7 to 0.82. Lead time, time between customer order and delivery, it went down from 4.5 to 0.56 days. Overall equipment effectiveness went down from 71.33%, went up to 98%. Productivity, 72 to 98.56. Average sigma level was 3.1, it went up to 4.6. So the recommendations are, the pandemic has resulted into either two unforeseen obstacles and hindrances in terms of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. World has become VUCA. That was the world order. Local and global supply chains are no exceptions. New, innovative, efficient, responsive, and resilient ways of managing the supply chain must evolve to tide over this crisis during critical transitions and enable businesses to sustain effectively in post-pandemic era. Our research has said that lean, agile, and green got to be practiced in tandem. All three are to be practiced in tandem because they are dependent on each other. It is recommended that businesses to adopt this in veteran spirit during immediate post-pandemic era. Organizations need to understand how lean, agile, and green concept must work together. It is possible that it works together to produce a sustainable, efficient, customer-centric supply chain in post-COVID era. Failure to deploy lean, agile, and green concepts in tandem would result in severe malfunctioning. This is what we found, because these are not related to each other. These are highly related to each other. And you have to deploy this in tandem. Would result in severe malfunctioning and environmental hazard for a given supply chain design. That was our recommendation. So takeaways through this session, you should have comprehended the changing face of supply chain management in the post-pandemic era. The pandemic has resulted into hitherto unfortunate obstacles and hindrances in terms of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity the world over. New, innovative, efficient, responsive, and resilient ways of managing the supply chain must evolve to tide over the crisis. Focus on three interventions as an outcome of research: lean, agile, green. It is recommended for business to adopt this methodology in letter and spirit during post-pandemic era. That organization need to understand how lean, agile, and green concept must work together to produce a sustainable, efficient, customer-centric supply chain. As I said, lean will enhance your velocity. Agile will take you near to your customer. It will involve the customer from day one, and green will make you sustainable. It will cut down the wastes in the cut down the risks in the supply chain. The failure to deploy lean, green, and agile concepts in tandem would result in severe malfunctioning and environmental hazard for a given supply chain design. With this, I end my presentation, and these are my contact details, and I will be very happy. I'll be more than happy if you would like to know anything and need my assistance on any of these things. I'll be more than happy, because we are in the same family. And I'm very grateful to ASQ Education Division and QMD joint webinar. And now may I hand over to Sova for doing the taking it further.
Thank you so much, Goutam, for that very informative presentation. So we are at 6:55. So I will just take a couple of questions from the audience, and then we shall be winding up the webinar. So the first question I have is, do you believe all repetitive tasks in the supply chain will be replaced by exponential technology?
Yeah, it will, because you see what happens is that if you look at a supply chain, there are tiers which you see in the supply chain. One is the tasks which we do day in and day out, and you will see another area where we do the strategization part of the supply chain. What will happen for a greater emerging greater profit of the companies? We have to shift ourselves. Senior management have to shift themselves more on the strategy part rather than routine interventions, because supply chains will become more collaborative. And as you see, the collaborations are happening. The scope of collaboration will enhance based on strategies and not by routine work. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question we have is, the customer willing to pay for more now that they understand the risk of a cheap supply chain?
Yeah. Very good question. I must compliment. You see, the customers are always willing to pay more if you are delivering value. Because today's the customers are more educative, they know what they are getting. So therefore, in order that you can sustain, you have to create value which none else has created so far. And if you create that value, you will see that the customer is willing to pay for, which we call as consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is what the customer is getting value, and what is the cost at which he is acquiring the value. So the customer doesn't mind if he is getting more value. So that is what will emerge. To answer your question, yes, customers are willing to pay more, but they would like to know that what value you are giving, and the great values do not come out of cheap supply chains. Great value comes out of good supply chains. Does not mean costly supply chains, more agile supply chains, more lean and more green supply chains. Creating value is the main essence, and more you create value, more you sustain your supply chains.
Then we have, it is good to encourage supplier to go green. I am not sure how they can benefit customer in improving the quality and flow of material to customer.
Well, good question again. You
It
see,
is,
yeah.
I thought you were saying repeat. Never mind.
No. I got the question. I said it is a good question.
I see.
You see, this is a challenge which we face. Now, the implementation of green has to be very systematic. Like, if you do not have a roadmap, how will you implement green with your suppliers? Then you will always find this obstacle. What you will find is that you are moving in a haste, and it will break your supply chains. The suppliers do not understand what they are getting out of green. As a result, they will not cooperate, and you will go out of business. So first, you have to have the companies where we have implemented. First thing is you have to have supplier councils. You have to have a supplier educations. Continuously, you have to speak to them, talk to them, involve them, engage them, and tell them what is the impact of going green, how that will help their costs going down and making the making the supply chains risk free. And as it happens, you will see that your cost will go down because your failures will reduce, your FCR, your FOR, your field call rate will improve. And as that happens, you can always consider that in supporting the supplier. We call it you create a privilege class vendors, PCV, and whoever is becoming clean, you support them, if possible financially as well, because it is all integral cost. You will find your integral cost will go down. So as your integral cost goes down, naturally you can support the suppliers for the efforts which they have taken. So most importantly, you should have a roadmap. It doesn't happen in one day. You have to have a roadmap. And many countries, it doesn't happen by legislations. You cannot do that. You have to involve them. You have to encourage them. You have to motivate them. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I will now stop recording, and